We're going to start going over our test review for Unit 8. If you have any questions, please make sure you let us know. On number 1, what is the domain and the range of the quadratic function? So remember, domain is x and range is y. I do want you to notice on this graph, it's a little bit hard when I zoom in, but this is counting by 2's. So we need to make sure we pay attention to the scale. So the scale is by 2's. And that's going to come into play if we need our domain or our range. So our domain, excuse me, is x. And you can see that there's arrows, so it's going to be infinite, which means we're going to have all real numbers. The range has a bottom at -2. So remember, we always want to have the pattern of bottom less than y, less than our top. So our bottom is a -2. But you'll notice on the top, it is arrows also. We don't have a top. So we don't actually need to write this piece. We are going to write or equal to because our line, when we zoom in, is touching that -2 line. And when you do your tests on the computer, when we do our test on the computer, you can make sure. So when we don't have a top, we can erase that. We just have our bottom. But I do want you to notice on these answer choices that it is flip-flop. So the y is first. So remember, when we flip-flop our numbers and our letters, we have to pay attention. So the arrow is going to the -2. We need to keep it that way. For this next one, domain and range, I would suggest that you graph it. You can either graph it on the calculator, but the calculator is a little bit hard to manipulate. I would suggest that you use Desmos, so 3 parentheses x plus 9. Just make sure that you type it in exactly. Squared minus 8. And I like this on Desmos because it's easy to manipulate that. And it is asking about domain and range. So you can see that the domain just keeps going. So the domain is going to be all real numbers. And usually I just write my own and then I look at my answers, right? So my range does have a bottom like our previous one. And when I look at that, the bottom is touching -8. So that is going to be my lowest, -8. So very much like number 1, -8 less than or equal to y, but it does not have a top. So we don't have to put anything there, but we can go ahead. Notice your answers. We have domain, all real numbers here, but our range is flip-flop. So again, if we flip-flop, we have to make sure we flip-flop that inequality. So C and D would be our answer choices. Number 3 is also talking about range. So range is y. So I'm immediately going to cross out the x's because if we're talking about range, we don't need to worry about x's. And that way it's not an issue. Now, you can do a couple of things. If you wanted to see what this actually looked like, you could put these numbers as a table into Desmos. Okay, if you wanted to make a table, so you're going to hit the plus sign, you could do the table, and we could put those numbers in. So -4. And when you do this, it will plot the points on the graph for you. So if you're a visual person, this might be something you want to utilize because you will have Desmos on your computer for your test. 3, 4, 4. It is a little bit tedious to do it this way. But if you're a visual person, that might be something that is helpful for you. So use whatever method you can think of. There, I will also show you how to do this without graphing it, but I want to give you all the options so you can be as successful as possible. -8, almost done, -7, and 1. Okay, so now I'm going to just change this so you can see my dots. So if I connected my dots, it would be all real numbers for the domain, which again, we're not worried about. 3, -8 is in fact our bottom. So when we talk about that, we're looking at the y because it's ranged. So -8 was the bottom. So this is very much like number 2. And if we flip-flopped it around, y is greater than or equal to -8, which is C. Now, the other method you could do is you could see that this is going down, down. This is going down, and now it's going up. So that tells you that this is, in fact, your vertex. And since it's going down, down, down to -8 and then up, there's your bottom piece. So that would be the other way that maybe you would want to look at this. Okay. Vertex and axis of symmetry. Remember, vertex is where the graph changes direction. Axis of symmetry is always an x equals. So I know automatically it can't be B and it can't be C because those say y equals. And if you aren't sure about axis of symmetry, remember AX means equal. So you have a big X, so x equals. And we can come down here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Here is my vertex, which is at -2, -3. And if you remember, x equals, so it's going to be the x of the vertex. X equals -2. So when I look at my answer choices, I would choose A. So lots of vocabulary on this test. Make sure you know it. This is talking about zeros. Zeros are rocks, roots, zeros, x-intercept solutions. So I have 2, so I'm looking where it crosses the x-axis. So I have I have -1, 0, and it looks like +3, 0. So when I look at my answer choices, C and D are going to be the ones that I want to choose. So again, vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. What are the zeros? So we have rocks again on a graph. Now, these are not pretty numbers. It's between 0 and 1, and it's between 1 and 2. So these are not nice whole numbers. So when I go through and I look at my answer choices here, I can eliminate A and B. Those are not nice answer choices. C, there's only 1, but I know that I have 2 roots, so it has to be D. Okay, plus 11 over 12 is really close to 1, and that line is not super close to 1. So now we're given an equation and we have to mark all this true statements. So what I would suggest you do is I would suggest you graph this in Desmos to look at that picture so that you can figure out which of these are true. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to delete that. And if I put this in, -4x squared minus 2x plus 6. Okay, so when I look at this, I can zoom in if I need to. And the nice thing about Desmos, remember, is you can touch, like there's the vertex, there's the y-intercept, there's the zeros. So when I look at my answer choices, it says the vertex is at 0, 6. Okay, well, this 0, 6 is not the vertex. The vertex is actually just a little bit higher. So I know it's not A, and it's a max vertex, so it can't be B. Maybe C. C says a max of 6.25. Well, yes, the max high Y number is in fact 6.25, so C would be an answer choice. The vertex is at 1, 0. Well, that right there, that vertex, that is not a vertex. That is a root, so not D. E says the vertex is negative 0.25625. So our answers for this are going to be C and E. And really, it's just a matter of looking at the graph and making sure that you can see what is happening. Okay? The graph of the quadratic function a is shown on the grid. Which statements are supported? So again, now we don't have to graph it. They've given us a picture. And I can see here that I have at 1, 0, this is a root, x-intercept solution. This is also a vertex. That happens to be a minimum. I have a y-intercept at 0, 1. So remember the difference between x and y-intercepts. If it's an x-intercept, you're going to have your number where the x is. If it's a y-intercept, you're going to have a number where the y is. And this also talks about axis of symmetry, which goes through the vertex. So x equals, and it happens to go through 1. So the x-intercept is at 1, 0. That is true. The coordinates of the y-intercept are 0, 1. That is true. The axis of symmetry, x equals 1. That is true. So my answer is all 3. And sometimes it happens to be all of them, none of them, or just maybe a couple. So just pay attention. And again, if you don't know your vocabulary, this is going to be real hard. So make sure you study that in your notes. I'm going to erase those lines. They're in my way. So this one is, what transformation is occurring? So this is another example of where you might want to use your Desmos. I'm going to go over my Inspire here, if I can make my window just a little bit bigger, to make that so you can see it a little bit easier. So I'm going to graph both of these in my Desmos. So when I do that, I already have x squared there. That's our parent function. So remember, everything gets compared to that. I'm going to adjust this one to x plus 1 minus 3. Now, if you already know what happens, then by all means, you don't need to graph this, but it might help you to see what's happening. So you can see our original vertex was at 0, 0, and now my new vertex is -1, +3. So remember, insiders lie. So if this is at -1, -3, that is showing us that, in fact, this went left 1 and this went down 3. And you can see that in the picture, right? To the left 1 and down 3. If I wanted to know if it was a compression or a stretch, I could get rid of my pluses and minuses. And when I do that, it looks exactly the same. So there's no numbers being multiplied. So there's no compression or stretch here. So read carefully. Lots of times kids will write the correct answer and then circle the wrong one. So be real careful. This one says we're translating 3 to the right. So remember, insiders lie. Right is normally a positive, but since insiders lie, that's going to be a negative. And down 2, but up and down is normal. So down is not a plus, it is a minus. So which one looks like that? B. And again, look how similar those are with the symbols. So go ahead and write your own and then choose your answer. That's going to maybe prevent some issues. This one is talking about what is the vertex? So remember, HK, insiders lie. So 3, -9. Now you could also graph this one if you weren't sure. If you do that, it would look like, so let me change mine in my computer. So we have F, I'm going to type it exactly like I see it. I have G of X equals F of X minus 3. Oops. Minus 3, quantity squared, minus 9. And then what I can do, I can move this. Oh, I don't need my squared. That's why it looks a little bit funky. Sorry about that. And then 3, -9. So if you weren't sure just by looking at it again, you could go ahead and graph it to double check. And you even have some, so there's like questions like this where they're drop boxes. So that's why I gave you the answers like that. This one again, how was it translated. So insiders lie, right? Inside, think about the fly machine. That's a horizontal. So positive 3 is usually right. So this is going to be left 3 and up 5. Again, you could graph it. I think you're getting the hang of knowing you can do that. So I'm not going to show you this one, but same concept as what we had on number 11. If it is reflected over the x-axis, okay, so if we're reflecting over the x-axis, that means that our A is negative, right? So it's going to open down. So before I do anything, I'm going to make a little note here. And I know it's going to open down. So it can't be A and it can't be C because B and D are the only ones that open down. If we stretch horizontal, so think about if you are on the bench press and you have the bar and you're stretching your arms up horizontally, right? That means that this is going to be narrow. So the only one that's narrow and goes down is B. So you would need to, or you could even guess and plug in some numbers to see what that graph looked like. But pay attention to if it's horizontal or vertical. Hold on, let's go back and look at that. Horizontal, I said bench press. I apologize. Let me go back. Horizontal, this is the fly machine. This is the fly machine. This is going to be a left, right, horizontal. So when you're stretching, that is actually going to be wide. I apologize, right? So if you're stretching, it's going to look like this. So I apologize. That one was D, not B. That was my mistake. I misread that. So make sure that one is D. Even teachers mess up sometimes. All right, you will need to be able to graph an equation. So one of the things you can do again is you could put this into Desmos, right? Negative f of x minus 3 plus 4. Now, when you graph these in the computer, you need to have some specific points to click so that it draws your line correctly. You'll need to have, so vertex is always a good one. You could have some roots and maybe you write those down. So when we look at this, my vertex, I'm just going to write those down from Desmos. My vertex was 3, 4, and I had roots or x-intercept 0 solutions at 2, 0 and at 6, 0. So if I was to do this in the computer, I would put a dot here. I would put a dot at 3, 4. I'm sorry, that is, I put that backwards, I do believe. Let me go back and look. No, 3, 4, that is correct. And was it 6, 0? 5, 0. Oh, 1 and 5. I'm so sorry. I'm having a senior moment, I guess. It's been a long day. So 1 and 5. So here and here, and then it will draw you the graph on the computer. So please, please, please make sure you pay attention to that. So that it draws it correctly for you, because sometimes you guys write it correctly on your paper and then it doesn't come out right on the computer. All right, what is the value of f of 16? So remember, this is x equals 16. So you can either plug this into the equation, right? We can put it here where the x is. So I could come over here, start a new document, go to my calculator, and I can just type this whole thing in, negative 3 parentheses. If you can do 16 minus 12 is 4 in your head, that's fine. If not, then type the whole thing, squared, and then plus 4 is negative 44. Remember, so that means if we graphed it, the 16 would be an x, and the negative 44 would be a y. You could also put this into the graph. So you could type in negative 3 x minus 12 quantity squared plus 4. I know I can't see the graph, but that's not what I'm worried about. I could look at the table, and I could go down in my table to where x is 16, and there is my y. So there are a couple ways you could do that one. Let's look at 16 here. We're almost done. The graph of the function, the vertex is -1, -10, and goes through 1, 2. I would definitely, HK. So I have something. Now, insiders lie. So this is going to be a +1 and then the -10. And I would actually eliminate some answer choices. This is a +10 and this is a +10. If I need this to go through 1, 2, then I'm going to go into my Desmos and I'm going to graph both of these answers. I'm going to say 3 parentheses x plus 1 quantity squared and then -10. And I'm going to look and see, right? I know where 1, 2 is. Now, I will tell you that you might want to change it. Okay, there's my 1. So I can see up here, in fact, this goes through 1, 2. If I graphed the second one, -2 parentheses x plus 1 quantity squared and then -10, I can see, look, I know we can't see it on my graph right here. It's way down here. So it does not go through 1, 2. So that might be your best bet on that. What is the equation in standard form? So we did this not too long ago. We said you need to go ahead. If it's squared, we need to write it twice. -18. And you need to multiply. You can do box or you can do distribute FOIL. All right, I'm going to leave this 2 out front. X times x is x squared. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times 4 is 16. And then I'm going to bring down my -18. Now I need to distribute this 2 on everything. So 2x squared plus 8x plus 8x. 2 times 16 is 32 minus 18. And last, I'm going to collect my like terms. So I have, these are both x's. These are both regular numbers. So I've got 2x squared. 8 plus 8 is 16x. And 32 minus 18 is 14. Now you can, of course, always to check yourself, you could graph this and you could graph this and make sure they overlap to double check that work, which is always a good thing if you have the time. This is old. This is a blast from the past. Standard form in linear is ax plus by equals c. So you need to keep in mind we want x and y on the same side, and there's going to be no fractions or decimals, and a has to be positive. So we're going to actually start with point slope. So y minus y1. Now y is also negative, so we're going to make it a positive. So y minus -8 is y plus 8 equals m. And this is on your formula chart. You do not have to memorize this. X minus x1. So to do this, we're going to distribute y plus 8, 3/4 times x. 3/4 times -4 is -3. I'm going to move my 8 over. Ran out of room. I'm going to write up here y equals 3/4 x minus 11. So that would be y equals mx plus b form. We need x and y on the same side, no fractions. Now, if I want to get rid of my fraction, I need to multiply by my denominator. 4y equals 3x minus 44. Make sure you distribute that 4 on everything. I'm going to move my 3x over. Oh no, my x is negative. So I'm going to multiply the whole thing by a -1. Negative times a negative is a positive. Here, negative times a positive is a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. So my answer here is A. So be real careful there. That one is old, old, old. Number 19. So on your, if you did a paper copy, I forgot to put the table, so I gave you a little handout for that. I actually prefer to do my, and when I'm writing in a regression equation, I prefer to use list and spreadsheets. You can do this in Desmos if you prefer. That's just not my particular preference. So I'm going to put this table in for you real quick. When you do put the table in, whether it's in Desmos or in the Inspire, make sure that you put it in correctly so it doesn't mess up your data. Okay, that's going to be a big deal, especially since these numbers are bigger. Two, four, four, 8, 0. 113 750 46 740 76950. All right, so remember we can go to C1 and we're going to go menu. 4, 1. We used to use 3, but now we're doing quadratic. So 6, X, Y, enter, enter. So here's my A, my B, and my C. And I can write that down. I'm going to go ahead and write it because I want to, those answer choices look real similar. So we're going to say Y equals 0.8 X squared. And then my B is a -15 X. And then my C is plus 21,005. So when I look at those answer choices, notice it's minus plus. So this one says plus 15, plus 15. This one says minus 21. So it's going to be this one. And then according to his function, the company with 450 employees. Okay, well, employees is X. So this is saying X equals 450. Would be how much money. So you can do a couple things. You could take this equation that we've written, you could put this into Desmos, and then you could put in X equals 450. Personally, when the number is that big, finding the intersection in Desmos is going to be real tricky. I would suggest that you just put 450 where X is, right? So 450, and then we'll square it. Minus 15 times 450 plus 21,005. And when I do that in my calculator, I can say 0.8 times 450 squared. You can also use parentheses. Minus 15 times 450 plus 21,005. Okay, so I got 176, 255. Okay, so none of those exactly match, but if you remember, we kind of rounded some of these numbers when we wrote it. So the one that's closest to my answer is going to be 182. So you can pick the one that's closest, especially if you're rounding with those decimals. All right, this is from last unit. This is going to be your snowflake, right? A, C, and B, A, and A. So 2 times -35 is -70. This is a +9. C is negative, so I have a positive and a negative, and my A is 2. So we did talk about when we did this before, if you weren't sure about your factors, you could graph. We could say, all right, 70 divide X, and then look at that table, Control T to see. We want to have, they need to subtract because they're different, and they need to equal 9. All right, well, that's 33 Oh, well, 14 minus 5, that's 9. And I need a positive. So I'm going to have a positive 14 and a negative 5. We need to simplify. And if you're not sure if it simplifies, again, utilize your calculator. You could put in 14 divide 2, and it will tell you 7. So I have 7 over 1. Remember that denominator gets swung forward. So I have 1x plus 7. This does not simplify. So I'm going to swing my 2 forward. 2x, excuse me, I'm not sure why I put an a there. 2x minus 5. So it's going to be C. Please let us know if you have any questions. I hope you have a great night.